of Warwick.
Case levels are still low over the whole country, but clearly we've got these local outbreaks, and that is a real cause for concern because it looks like this Indian variant is able to spread more effectively than the so-called UK variant.
Wales will move to its next easing of lockdown on Monday with the reopening of indoor hospitality and entertainment venues. International travel rules will also be relaxed, but the Welsh Government is still advising against non-essential trips. It remains unclear whether British holidaymakers will be allowed into Portugal when the rules change next week. Although it's on the UK government's quarantine-free green list, the Portuguese government has extended its lockdown until the 30th of May. That could mean that only returning residents will be allowed entry. Israel has called up 9,000 reservists who could be used to stage a ground invasion of Gaza. Israeli forces have launched further attacks on the Hamas-ruled territory, and Palestinian militants have fired more rockets over the border. There's also been violence in parts of Israel with mixed Jewish and Arab communities. Former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt fears Israel is moving away from the idea of a two-state solution.
Ultimately, for people who follow the complexities of politics in Israel, is, I think, the solution for the Palestinians to have their own state alongside Israel. And Israel's taken a lot of actions in recent years that have made it more difficult to achieve that as the ultimate objective.
4 people have been charged with right-wing terrorism offences. Police say 2 men and a woman from Keighley in West Yorkshire and a man from Anglesey will appear in court later. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have teamed up with stars like Charles Dance and Dame Shirley Bassey for this morning's Mental Health Minute. Just before 11 o'clock, we'll be joining all of Global's radio stations to broadcast a special message reminding us to keep talking about the issue. It marks the end of Mental Health Awareness Week. In the city, the FTSE 100 is just reopening at 69.63 after closing down 41 points yesterday, and the pound buys $1.40 and €1.16. And the weather, a cloudy start for all with some sunny spells developing, staying dry for most in the north and east, but showers across southern England, Wales and Northern Ireland, a high of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom, I'm Simon Conway.
The Wi-Fi.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call the Commissioner. Put your calls to Cressida Dick now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
It is indeed LBC, and it's 4 minutes after 8 on Friday, May the 14th, and Call the Commissioner with Dame Cressida Dick, who we welcome back to studio. It's been a couple of months so we've seen you, and it's good to have you back. I know we need to talk about events that will take place on Monday when we move to the next step of lockdown and the role of the police on that. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But let's go straight to the calls, and thank you. And as I always say, we are suitably socially distanced, so please don't think there's any suggestion that we are pushing the law. We are not. We are sitting appropriately apart as we take the first call, which is from Munesh in Hounslow. Munesh, I don't think you're talking about the easing of lockdown. It's something a little more troubling. Good morning to you.
I suspect so, yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Mrs. Cressida Dick. My question to you is the stats on knife crime has been on the up, and it has been for some time now, under your control and under the Mayor's control, Sadiq Khan. It seems you haven't taken it seriously. Can you please kindly tell me what have you done so far, and how can you prove that it's been effective, and what is your strategy going forward to tackle this? Because it seems that you're not taking it seriously enough, in my opinion, and my fellow Londoners who live here.
Okay, let me. I mean, I'm going to put that to you, Commissioner. I have to say, I have the privilege of working with somebody, and I know you are, but that's a worry that someone says twice you and your colleagues aren't, quotes, taking this seriously. Commissioner.
Well, first of all, Munish, this is our number one priority. It has been violent crime on the streets, and in particular, knife crime has been my number one priority since I became Commissioner. And we have had some considerable successes, but I would say to you, it's still, of course, too high. It's horrific that we have had teenagers killed in the way we have earlier this year. But in the last 3 years, if you look at stabbings of young people, people under 25, which is the sort of core category, I'm afraid, of people who do get stabbed, we've had reductions each year in the last 3 years, including the last year. We had a overall 15% reduction in homicides last year. We have a detection rate on homicide of 96%. We've been investing in anti-knife crime work. We've put more and more officers into that. We're 1 year into our new violence suppression units. They alone have arrested 6,000 people, taken 700 knives off the streets. We have been extremely successful in increasing, for example, our work against drug dealers. I think an extra 1,500 charged last year. Shootings are down year on year on year. I know you're talking about knife crime. So actually, overall, violent crime in London in those categories has been reducing.
Well, I have
but
to challenge,
it's horrible.
Horrible. I have to change it. I mean, Commissioner, you and we don't have to say. People will be listening to this show now who have lost one, so I'm terribly sorry to quote in numbers. It's a brutal way to do it, but it's the only way the Commissioner and I can have a conversation about this. You will know that the total number of young people killed in the city was down considerably, as you say, to 14 for last year, which is tremendous. And again, apologies for anyone touched by this. But we're already looking at 12, and we're not through May yet, Commissioner. You know as well as I do that is not going to stay below 14, and this is a year when most of us haven't been able to leave our homes. Because of lockdown.
So since January, Nick, we have had, tragically in London, 21 people under the age of 25 killed, and we've had 14 teenagers. So that latter figure, you said 12, is 14, is utterly appalling. And some of these are very young teenagers.
That's matched the total of last year.
Absolutely. And
and we're in May.
Yes. That's absolutely right, and
I know you take it seriously, but how can you possibly, Commissioner, sit there and say that this is a success?
I haven't said it's a success. What I've said is we've had a lot of successes against the crime types that sit, if you like, below and lead to these horrible homicides. But it's appalling that in our city we have 14 teenagers killed in a few months,
and we hadn't had lockdown.
And it's appalling that the vast majority of the people who are accused of this are also teenagers. And you will be aware that I'm afraid this affects some communities very much more than others. So
what do you mean by that?
Well, if I look at the victims of homicides this year, of the total 40, 19 40 overall.
Overall, sorry.
I'm sorry to trade figures with
you.
This
the only
is
other way,
terrible
the only way
thing
we can talk, of course.
19 of those come from our black communities, our African Caribbean communities. Of course, that's hugely out of proportion with London. And when you look at those accused, you're talking of 60-70% coming from our black communities. And some geographic areas are far more prone to this than others. So the question Munesh asked me is, what are we doing about it? Well, I've put 600 more officers into the violence suppression units over the last year. They are in the areas where there's most knife crime. We have had record successes in taking drugs off the street, cash off the streets, and locking up serious organised criminals and county lines as well.
And just lastly on this, perhaps, and I want a word from you on the violence suppression unit, because I know it's celebrated its first year, but should we look to the communities? Could they be doing more?
Absolutely. I mean, we do have a lot of support from our communities. I go out and about on the streets all the time, and particularly in high violence areas, and people are delighted to see their police there. They want them, and people are giving us information all the time.
So what should these families be doing?
But what we have, what we've recently had, you may have seen, is our Hardest Call campaign, where you have the 5 mothers who've lost young sons talking about the hardest call. For them, the hardest call came after the death of their son. For all the rest of us, it might seem a bit of a hard call to ring with information about knife crime to Crime Stoppers completely anonymously. People can do that. And people have to come together, as so many reports have said, to try to help young people to stay away from crime, and if they get involved, to be diverted. And yesterday I was looking at our Divert scheme, young people in custody who we are supporting with coaches and workers. They've taken out of the criminal justice system to make a new good life. So you need to do prevention and you need to do enforcement.
Quick word on the violence suppression unit. It is 12 months old. What has that achieved in a sentence, if you would, Commissioner?
Officers in uniform on the street where people want them. 620, I think, of them. They've had over 6,000 arrests. They've seized over 700 knives. They've been doing stop and search. They've been engaging with the community. They've been arresting the most prolific and nasty knife offenders. But they've also been in schools talking to people about knife crime. They have been engaging with young people. They have tried to do some of the prevention and encourage others to help with prevention, including in communities. But they've been helping with our enormous enforcement effort. Violent crime is our number one priority, and every single officer in the Met will tell you that. And we have a mass of other resources who are either full-time or very large proportion of their time engaged on violent crime. We've been growing, and I've been putting it into knife crime.
OK. Commissioner, thank you. Munesh, thank you. Next call. Joanne in Surbiton. You're through to the Commissioner. Go ahead, Joanne. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello. So as a woman in London, the tragic death of Sarah Everard and the heavy-handed approach by the police at the vigil has left me questioning how much of a priority women's safety is for the Met. And in light of what's happened, what will the police be doing differently?
Commissioner.
Well, thank you very much. I know the images of the vigil certainly upset many people, and it sounds like they upset you as well. I would commend to you, it's quite a short read, the independent report by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, where they said in these terms that our officers were not heavy-handed. They were thoughtful, they were sensible, they were proportionate, they were calm, they were faced with some vile abuse, they were patient, they used exemplary conduct. I could go on. We were in a most invidious position. We have been dispersing gatherings over the last 12 months. Let's remember we were in Tier 4. Events such as a protest are not exempt under Tier 4 in terms of gatherings. You couldn't have such a gathering, essentially, under the law. And we had a very tightly packed crowd, which we engaged with. We explained the law. We spent a very long time. So I know it upset people, but I think you will agree that the position of the police over the last 12 months in enforcing these regulations at funerals, at weddings, at wakes, at all kinds of things where people want to just have fun as well, and protest, has been very difficult. And I don't want you to think that my officers take any pleasure in this. They have been trying to save lives. In terms of violence against women and girls, I cannot tell you how outraged people in the Met have been, as everybody has been across the city and the country, by Sarah's horrible, horrible death, murder, and the circumstances surrounding it. Obviously sub judice, I can't say any more, except that we're appalled by that. So we've been stepping up. Yesterday...
I appreciate you can't comment on that, but listen to this. This is my LBC colleague Sheila Fogarty speaking with Mayor Khan after the Sarah Everard demonstration.
Right.
London's streets are not safe for women, are they?
No, they aren't, or for girls. And it's really important that people of my gender understand that.
That was in March, Commissioner. What would you say to the Mayor? London streets aren't safe for women or girls. That's what he says.
I think we've been hearing from women and girls, not just in the last few months, but for years. Right? I have made, dealing with violence against women and girls a core part of my service as a woman as well, ever since I joined. It is unacceptable,
You've not been
of
a woman
course.
since you joined, Commissioner.
Sorry, but since I joined, it's been a core at my work. Sorry, it's been at the core of my work. I care deeply about this.
But is Mayor Khan right?
I absolutely understand that many women feel fearful, and also that on occasions we see horrible, horrible events in which serious crimes are committed against women when they are simply
I'm going to try for a third time.
engaging.
Is Mayor Khan right, Commissioner?
I think there's far too much of this. Of course there is. There's far too much violence against women and girls on the street. I would like them to be very much safer. Of course I would. Which was the question.
So Mayor Khan is right.
Well, I wouldn't put it as strongly as that. I would say
is he an armchair critic?
The streets are not completely safe for everybody all of the time, and we'd love to live in that world.
Is he an armchair critic,
Unfortunately, there is far too much violence against women and girls. It is, of course, the case that people are more at risk at home than they are on the streets in many respects and in terms of numbers.
Is the Mayor an armchair critic, and how do you view another 3 years of him in post?
So I met with the Mayor yesterday. I speak regularly with the Mayor. I have a very, very productive working relationship with the Mayor. We don't always agree. I think we broadly agree on that point.
London streets aren't safe.
There is too much violence against women and girls, including on the street, which is why, and the question was about what are you doing about it, which is why yesterday, as it happens, was our Women's Safety Day. We had officers out dealing with predatory offenders, and we've invested again in the last few months in our predatory offender units. We had officers on horses and in uniform out in open spaces and out after dark. We've been talking to women all over London about where they feel unsafe. We've been looking at where they actually are unsafe, and we've been working with local councils and partners to try to ensure that our streets are safer for women. Where can we put CCTV? What other measures can we take?
All right. Joanne, thank you. Dawn in Chiswick, you're through to the Commissioner. Dawn, go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. I'm a mental health practitioner working for the NHS.
Oh, yes.
I live in Chiswick, and I struggle to get to work each day due to where there are a number of LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, and the Cycleway 9 having popped up during the pandemic, causing misery to motorists and bus drivers, etc.
Yep.
I have seen and heard a lot of my emergency service colleagues, including the police, on a blue light, who are stuck in traffic due to the restrictions and diversions.
Yes.
Commissioner, what is your position on this? And are you concerned about your members of the Met being significantly delayed in getting to their destination, crime scene, accident, etc., due to the LTNs and Cycleway 9? And even if I'm talking about Chiswick, these are, of course, are all spread across London as well. I am aware they're in other boroughs.
Dawn, thank you. Commissioner.
So this is a subject area which I know is really contentious, and of course isn't primarily, as you've indicated, Dawn, for us in the police. In that the decisions here are made, of course, by Transport for London and indeed by the Mayor. But we work really closely with the Mayor, and obviously what is trying to be balanced for our city is, on the one hand, this great desire in Vision Zero to reduce the number of road deaths to zero, to make this a city in which people are safer to walk and to cycle, and also, of course, to improve our environment. I think something that everybody feels strongly about, pollution in the air. Now, in a sense, certainly the latter is not a matter for me. I'm aware that these measures, which are designed to do all those things, can and do slow down all traffic, and
police.
They deter people from driving, and that's part of the point. But on occasion, when I'm
Are they hindering your officers?
On occasion, of course, it is harder for our officers to get through streets and roads that they previously could get through much faster. As with any measure which. Well, I'm not calling for a review. What I say is we need. I am looking at it carefully. Of course, I am. And on occasion, we will talk to. We will have a conversation with Transport for London to point out where a particular thing might cause real difficulties. But it's a difficult balancing act. Of course, it is. We all want to save lives, and all the measures that are being taken are designed to save lives. But we're a life-saving organisation as well.
Well, it's interesting you would say saving lives, because one of my colleagues, Matthew Thompson, was out with some of your colleagues with the operation that we talked about.
I know.
Good. And one of your colleagues said this.
So these have all been put in all around the borough, the low traffic neighbourhoods, which obviously if we're chasing people with machetes and I'm coming round the corner, I can't go anywhere, that's 4 people with machetes got away. Because of all these measures and everything like that, it won't be long until somebody passes away because some emergency services can't get to somebody, whether it be police, ambulance or fire brigade.
Referencing your comment again, you're a life-saving operational organisation. Your colleague there would not have been able to get to 4 people with machetes. Something needs to be done, Commissioner.
Well, I understand. I completely understand his perspective. I go out in vehicles a lot. Many of my best friends drive response vehicles. Many of them were driving ambulances not so long ago, and they absolutely do comment on this. But what I'm saying is that as a city, decisions have to be made overall. And it can't just be about the ability for you wouldn't say to me, Nick, that putting in a new tower block gets in the way of the officers. It might get in the way of the officers, but it shouldn't be done because it's going to slow down a particular officer.
I don't want your blokes and women turning a corner and they can't continue their pursuit.
I absolutely accept that it is really getting quite difficult for them in some places, and our response times will suffer. However, on the other hand. And that's frustrating for them. On the other hand, it may be that other people's deaths are reduced, and also this is a long-term thing about trying to make, as I understand it, not my issue, trying to make our city safer for cyclists and safer for pedestrians.
So who's right?
Less pollution.
Your colleague or the Mayor?
I think they're both right. It's
come along,
no,
Commissioner.
seriously.
You can't both be right.
Well, they're both trying
One wants them, one doesn't. How can they both be
they're
right?
both trying to achieve good ends. The mayor has the overall responsibility.
One's trying
in
to stop
terms
four
of,
blokes with machetes.
Well, you're giving me a very specific
Indeed, I am. That's what policing is
example.
about, isn't it?
Yes, but you. Well, I think we've
At
probably
times.
come to the end of this argument, Nick. I'm not.
You're not shifting.
No,
All right,
no.
okay. Thank you for your call. Next call in a moment. Can I take you back to earlier this week? You appeared in front of a panel of MPs concerning Operation Midland. And it had seemed at one point you weren't clear whether you were actually what your role in the issue was. Had you forgotten when you left the Met?
So, Nick, I've said an awful lot about this, and I really don't think it's going to be helpful going into lots more detail here.
Why would it not be helpful?
But I don't have the transcript in front of me. I left the Met at the beginning of 2015.
Right, yeah.
And I said so at Hask
And you
as well.
were Assistant Commissioner during Operation Midland.
During the early weeks of Operation Midland, yes, I was.
And during those early weeks, did you brief the Home Secretary, Theresa May, or then Mayor Boris Johnson, on the start of Operation Midland?
No, I don't think I did at all, no.
So you have an inquiry that could be looking at the former Prime Minister being a murderer, and you don't tell the Home Secretary and the Mayor?
What I explained at Hask was that the operational lead for Operation Midland was DAC Steve Rodhouse, and of course I was his line manager when it was launched. I think everybody agrees, actually, in the cold light of day, that although many, many mistakes have been made in Midland, and I've apologised repeatedly to the people who've had such an awful impact to them, and also shown how the Met has changed since then, I think everybody agrees that it needed to be investigated. DAC Rodhouse was the operational lead, and of course he briefed me on occasion. He also briefed the Commissioner. I did not brief anyone else, and I can't tell you whether they were.
Right, so the incredible claims of a former Prime Minister being involved in murder, you don't tell your boss, the Home Secretary?
Well, as I say, I wasn't involved in that. I didn't. I wouldn't have seen that as my role, given the command chain. But actually, there are occasions, absolutely. And I'm not talking about this one. I'm not going to be speculative about here because I don't know what happened there.
Right.
But there are absolutely occasions where it may not be appropriate to tell a senior politician about an investigation in relation to another senior politician because it might compromise them. I face that quite often.
The other one was dead.
Well, it still might compromise them. And I face that situation really reasonably often in the
just
Metropolitan
lastly on
Police.
this, you mentioned politicians. 6 former Home Secretaries, Lord Howard, Lord Blunkett, have written a joint letter demanding a new inquiry. Why should it appear the police are above the law? Why should there not be a new inquiry?
So there's been a very extensive review, as you know, by Sir Richard Henriques.
Indeed.
And there has been an independent review by the Independent Office of Police Conduct. It's not just a review, it's an investigation. They did not find any grounds to bring people to a tribunal into a hearing. That's an independent investigation. Since then, there has been, to my knowledge, no new evidence. There is lots of opinion, there's no evidence. We've had a major review, we've had a large investigation.
What's it done to the image of the Met?
Oh, I think it
then,
has.
Cressida?
I think it has damaged the image of the Met. I absolutely do. Which is why I've put every effort I can into transforming the way in which we deal with
I hear
search
you,
warrants,
but
the way we deal
you've
with
got two
suspects, the way we
ex-judges
think
saying-
about belief.
You've got 2 ex-judges saying the organisation you lead broke the law. You've got 6 former Home Secretaries saying they want a new inquiry. You've got someone such as Lady Britton, the widow of Léon Britton, saying there's a cover-up, there's a culture of cover-up, there's a lack of moral fibre. Surely the only way to clean the stable is to have a full inquiry.
I hate hearing those comments. I do think it has damaged the Met, and
So
I
why not the
wish
inquiry?
that, obviously, I wish that it hadn't happened, if you like, and certainly that the mistakes hadn't been made. In the absence of new evidence, it would be wrong for me to start a whole new investigation. It's not the way due process works. And the Independent Office of Police Conduct have done an investigation, and they are not, and they could do another one if they had any new evidence, but they're not. And I appreciate it has been very upsetting for people, horrible for those most affected. It has damaged our reputation. My job has been to try to make sure nothing like this ever happens again.
Let's come back to some callers. Thank you, Dame Cressida. Chris in Ealing. Chris, you're on the radio. What's your question to the Commissioner? Good morning.
Okay, good morning. I'm blind, and on 2 occasions now, I've been knocked over by people on e-scooters and had a few near misses. It's not just that either. I've heard of quite a few people that have had similar incidents and have had things like mobile phones stolen and handbags. It seems to me, looking on social media, that it's getting worse and worse as these e-scooters get more and more popular.
Right.
Basically, I'd like to know what the police are doing about this and what is your opinion on this, because it's actually quite frightening, because you can't actually hear these things going, and they seem to do what they want. What is going on with this, please?
Well, can I just first, and I'm sure, Dame Cressida, I'd offer my condolences. I'm terribly sorry. I hope you're all right, and I hope you were attended to, and that's absolutely ghastly to know that happened to you. And I seem to recall, Commissioner, I think a young chap was knocked down earlier this month, also received serious injuries. The whole idea, what is the legality of people riding them anyway, and how concerning? It is thought that they are responsible in a way for a new form of crime, Commissioner.
So in terms of what you can and can't do, and this is very important, if you privately own an e-scooter, if you've bought one, you should only be riding it off-road, on private land, and obviously, with
Not
permission.
The park.
No, and it gets quite complicated. But for example, if I take the royal parks, you certainly should not be riding in those.
The local park, the local authority.
No, I think you should. I'd have to double check, but I think you absolutely should not be riding there.
So you can only really ride it in your back garden,
because you can ride it in your back garden or in someone else's land if they give you. Otherwise, you are riding without insurance.
Respectfully,
of course,
I don't ever see these folks being stopped.
Of course, you can hire one. And there are some hire companies, that have been licensed to do this.
You
and
hire
there's about
one and then take it to your back garden.
No. You're allowed on a hired vehicle. Though there's this limited hire going on as part of a sort of trial. So it's quite complicated for my officers. Of course, there has been an increase in the use of them, and I have to say, our caller, my heart really goes out to him. I'm sure. Cycling on the pavement as well is a concern. We've had reported to us where we kind of know that the e-scooter was used in the course of a crime. And bear in mind, of course, we have had, as you know, we had a huge peak of moped-enabled crime in 2017, now much, much reduced.
But these are more sort of nimble,
action.
Aren't they? They can get into parks.
And I'm sorry to say, street robbers, a crime which is prevalent in London, and part of our violent crime, we must reduce this.
So
again,
for this
they
poor chap
use
who was
bicycles.
sent flying, this blind fellow, what can be done?
Awful. Well, we have do stop people on their scooters.
How many have you stopped, Commissioner?
Many hundreds, not thousands.
Right.
Many hundreds. You can get, to those who might be thinking of doing this, you can get a £300 fine for doing it. But at the moment, we recognise that some people aren't that clear about the law. It's very early days. And again, it's a balancing thing here, isn't it, Nick? I mean, do you have an e-scooter?
I did have,
right.
But I was so frightened of it, I've given it to my son.
Well, there you are.
It's not really. I don't think I'm the build for e-scooters. In all honesty, Commissioner. I wonder whether we look to government. We need a campaign, an education campaign here.
Absolutely, and we are of course working with Transport for London. We're supporting the trial, and we're also looking at ways in which, because as you say, they're very nimble.
Okay.
Again, police need to use new tactics to be able to stop robbers on these bikes. We're not at the moment, but of course they do have high-powered motorbikes, and they do use cycles.
Yes.
Bringing somebody to a safe halt when they're travelling at 25 miles an hour. As you've said, we've had a tragic. I think in the country there have been 3 incidents where people have died.
Yes.
Not in London, but we've had some serious collisions. So. Right. This is at the trial stage at the moment, and it's serious.
We've got, I think, time for one more. Sheila is in Church Langley in Essex. Sheila, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Nick. Good morning, Cressida.
Good morning.
I just wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
I lost my son, Detective Sergeant Darren Barker, with the COVID thing,
Yes.
And I desperately wonder why you didn't put pressure on the government at that time to have all the police vaccinated. He would be alive today had he been vaccinated.
Was your lad in the Met, Sheila?
Yes.
He was?
Yeah.
OK. Well, I know the Commissioner feels it very keenly, but I have to put that question Should you have done more? Could you have done more? How much lobbying did you attempt to get your blokes and women to the front of the queue, Commissioner? And I'm sure you want to offer commiserates to Sheila as well.
First of all, Sheila, I didn't know Darren well, but I had met Darren, and I know a lot about him, and I hope you feel that colleagues from the Met have been supporting you as much as we possibly can in these terrible, tragic circumstances. My sincere condolences, and you are, putting your finger on something which was and is very close to my heart. I have been very loud behind the scenes about the case that there was for vaccination of police officers, and also publicly. I did and do believe that as a profession, my guys and girls were putting themselves at obvious risk. We carried on out on the streets. They did. They carried on doing their job, arresting people at the same rate, helping people in exactly the same ways they used to, not able to throw on loads and loads of personal protective equipment when you're running to a street fight or you're going to help somebody who's in extreme distress. And they were potentially, of course, despite our best measures to give them safety and equipment that would help them and guidance to help them look after themselves, they were likely to be transmitting potentially from their work to their family or from call to call. I thought the case was very strong, and in many other countries, of course, they did prioritise by occupation. Here, of course, NHS workers and social care workers, we completely understand. No police officer would be saying, we should be in front of the queue there. But I felt strongly about my frontline people, and I did ask and argue, and I went public on it as well. But in the end, there was a view that actually, because the vaccination programme was large, as I understand it, was large and complex, the best way to keep most people safe was, the numbers. I regret every single one of my people who caught COVID, let alone those who died. I do feel I did my best. And I felt on at least two occasions that we were winning the argument. But this, of course, has been a virus which has changed and changed and changed again.
And
the government policy has...
Was it the NHS? Was it the Home Office? Where could you not seem to clear a hurdle, Commissioner?
Well, this, I think, was during the beginning of the when there might have been a moment was when, if you remember, we went from the first phase to the second phase, and I expected us to be prioritised in the second phase. But the huge rollout, the complexity, the logistics of that, what we have been able to do, stopped that from the government and their advisors' point of view. What we have been able to do, though, is to get vaccines. Obviously, all our people have been shielding, or our older people, but of course mostly those aren't on the streets. They've had it. We've also been able to get a lot of our frontline officers prioritised if there's any, if you like, leftover vaccine at the end of the day. So huge numbers of our officers, even though quite young, are now vaccinated. But Sheila, that's no comfort to you, and I just send you my sincere condolences.
As indeed do I, Sheila, and of course everyone involved.
It's been a horrible time.
Just a couple of minutes, quick questions from me before I appreciate a little bit over time. This week would have marked, and I hope it has, but I fear it might not have been, the 18th birthday of Madeleine McCann, as you probably saw in the headlines. The Operation Grange continues. Is there any new information? How much longer will you sustain that operation, Commissioner?
The answer to the first is nothing new that I can tell you, and we're working closely, as you know, with Portuguese authorities and the German authorities, and we will continue until there is nothing left to do.
Is there a funding issue, or there's still enough funding currently?
There is not a funding issue at the moment, no.
And there won't be?
So far, we have received support every time we have felt that there was a line of inquiry to pursue to find out what happened to Madeleine.
One ugly aspect, and there have been many, of the COVID pandemic has been pet theft, particularly dog napping, as it's called, or puppy napping.
Horrid.
Absolutely ghastly. Heartache for families, because these little pups and dogs are members of the family. Has the Met taken action on this?
Well, we have, and we do take it seriously. You're right, there's been an increase in it. And of course, at the same time, because perhaps of the lockdown, there's been a huge increase in the price, the value, the financial value, which of course is not the value for you and I, dog lovers, but the financial value has gone up hugely. So unfortunately, it has really been attracting crooks. You'll be aware that the government have announced a task force to try to work out what more can be done and whether there's a need for a change in the law. and how we can all work together to reduce this.
There have been suggestions from my callers, Commissioner. Sometimes your blokes and women don't take it seriously enough. Can you give an assurance here that they should be?
I'm sorry to hear that. It is obviously a crime if somebody steals a dog. We do and should investigate it. I think the most important thing as well, though, is that people take good preventative measures. Make sure that you're careful about locking your gates and doors. Don't leave a dog unattended in the car or out by the shops.
And get them chipped, Commissioner.
Get them chipped, absolutely vital. If it does happen, call the police, call the council, check with the microchip database. There's some really good advice out there from Blue Cross. I'm an animal lover. I'm a dog lover.
Do you have a dog?
Not currently. My lifestyle doesn't really lend it. But if there was ever anything I look forward to in my retirement, whenever that might be, it would be having a dog again.
That leads me neatly into.
Oh dear.
You've got about 10 months to serve, Commissioner Cressida Dick. Will you be seeking an extension?
It's far too early for me to say. I haven't thought about it. I love my job. It's a privilege doing my job.
Well, you just said you're looking forward to owning a dog. Do you think that will be next year?
As they say, God willing, at some point, I will have a happy, healthy, and long retirement.
Would you seek an extension of your contract?
I haven't thought about it at the moment. I haven't. All I can say, and nor have I had any conversations with anybody, significant who would actually play a part
Typically,
in that.
Genuinely, when does that happen with a commission? Is it sort of 6 months out?
My notice period is 6 months, and of course, I would.
What are you hoping for?
I'm hoping to carry on doing my job in the way I am at the moment.
For another term?
Enjoying myself doing it. It's a massive privilege. I'm really proud of what the Met has done over the last year and the last 4 years.
Were you to be offered another term? Would you take it?
What's the question?
Would you accept it?
That hasn't happened. We have not got into any of these
If they asked me to do another year or so here, I say yes. What do you say about where you are?
Honestly, I haven't thought about it, and still, if it's ever entered my head, still less decided how I would approach such a conversation. My focus is today: teenage homicides, knife crime on the street, all the other things we've talked about.
Got to move you to Monday as well. Your men and women serving under you, and of course, citizens listening here. We move to the next step of lockdown.
Yeah.
What do people need to remember to do? Probably more importantly, not to do. How will you be policing Monday?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think everybody's looking forward to Monday. Of course they are. Much greater freedoms. I won't repeat the government messages, but it's clear with all the talk of the new variants, we all need to be very careful and sensible still. Our particular focus will be on ensuring that as there's more footfall on the streets and perhaps more people returning to work, that we're looking after, and restaurants, that we're looking after being present at and stopping crimes happening to women we talked about earlier, and men who are commuting or whatever. And we've already got lots of officers outside schools helping other people keep children safe.
Yes.
And then a big focus for us, of course, will be the licensed economy, because now people can go indoors. It's perfectly possible after all this long time of being unable to see our friends that some people will overindulge.
Yes.
London is not actually, when you compare it with other cities, a city that has massive problems with alcohol-related violence. But of course, that is an issue. So we will be out there. We're in the areas where we think there could be trouble. We'll be working with the local authorities and others. And of course, we will be trying to help keep everybody safe from the pandemic as well as from other possibilities.
And after all the grave subjects we've discussed, a lighter one to finish. Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick, did you solve Line of Duty?
Well, first thing to say is we have in the Met a fantastic anti-corruption command, and they've had some, you've seen an awful case come to finalisation in the last couple of days. We're really serious about this work. I've learnt not to comment on Line of Duty. It's a massively popular programme.
Do you watch
clearly? I have seen it. Absolutely, I have seen it.
Does it reflect
It's
policing?
great drama, and the Met has its own Kates and Steves and
who are you then?
Who
are you?
Hastings. I'm not Hastings.
No, that's it. Clip it there.
No, I'm not Hastings. We have them though. We have those people, and I'm very proud of the work that we do. Did I know that it was? I think his name's Mr. Buckles.
Yeah.
Having not watched every programme. And honestly, no, I didn't.
You didn't, but you did watch the final.
No.
The final episode.
I know what happened.
Thank you for your time. Good luck to all your colleagues, the amazing work you've done, and the fresh challenges, of course.
I'm very,
that come your
very
way.
proud of them. They're fantastic.
That come on Monday. Dame Cressida Dick appearing here on LBC When News is next.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner has told LBC low-traffic neighbourhoods have on occasion made policing in London more difficult. Local roads are closed off in some boroughs as part of efforts to tackle congestion, pollution and improve road safety. Dame Cressida Dick says the force will speak to Transport for London, where the LTNs are causing real difficulties during emergencies. The government says it won't hesitate to take further action if necessary to respond to the spread of the Indian coronavirus variant. Cases have more than doubled in the last week. Local lockdowns haven't been ruled out, and second vaccine doses could be brought forward. Israeli ground forces have begun launching attacks on Gaza. Troops have been placed along the border with the Hamas-ruled territory.